Alright everybody, it is Sunday morning and we're going to take another trip around the world today. Probably not going to be a whole lot to talk about today. I've been doing a lot with my native tank this week and not much else. I'm really excited about it. So we're going to move right along probably till we get to the native tank, then we'll probably slow down a little bit. I got a lot to talk about on that tank. This is my 29-gallon miscellaneous and nothing really going on this week. I shot a little bit of video of my African dwarf frogs in this tank. If you're interested, I did go into a little more detail about my experience with keeping the frogs. Other than that, not much going on at all in this tank. You can see the water level's a little low, so it's going to time to either top off or to probably just go ahead and do a water change. It's been a little while since I've done one, so it's probably about time for that. Otherwise, nothing at all going on in the 29. My Gourami tank here, my Gourami jungle, is still ticking over. Nothing really going on this week. I do need to get in there and do a little bit of plant grooming, a little bit of plant removal. The only thing I've really had happen in this week was a few days ago, one of my skunk loaches appeared to be really pretty much dying. I don't know what was wrong with it, but it looked terrible. Its skin was all blotchy and gray, and it just looked awful. It was listless. It was, heavy respiration or whatever you want to call that, where they're, passing water rapidly over their gills. And it looked worse the next day, and then by yesterday I couldn't find it anymore. It had been sitting pretty much right here on top of this rock, kind of underneath that wood, and it hadn't moved in 2 days, and then I no longer saw it. So I don't know if it's dead and been devoured. I don't know if it's just dead and underneath of a rock somewhere. I have given the tank a sniff on a couple of occasions. I know it might sound funny to smell your fish tanks, but I often smell my fish tanks. You can learn a lot about what's going on in a tank by becoming familiar with how it smells. And it doesn't smell funny at all. It doesn't smell like I've got anything going on in there. It certainly doesn't smell like there's a fish in there dying or decaying. I can't say the same about my Black Ghost knifefish tank. We'll get to that in a moment. But as far as I know, nothing else is going on in this tank, and there are no issues. If the skunk loach did die, it got taken care of by the other loaches probably, or else it's just not enough of a decaying mass in there to really affect my bioload or anything. So I'm not too worried about it. Nature is probably just going to take its course with that one. If I do see it, of course, if I do see a dead body float by, or I see it, stuck in the leaves somewhere, I will certainly get in there and get it out. Make no mistake, I'm not saying to ignore a dead fish in your tank, but sometimes they don't cause problems and you don't even know a fish died until long after its body's already gone. So that's all that's really going on here in the Gourami tank. And once again, this is a nice look at the tank when I'm not feeding it. You see what a nice, calm, peaceful, relaxing tank this is. Not a lot of activity goes on in here when I don't have food in the tank or when I'm not standing right up in front of it. My Angelfish tank. Can't really think anything that's going on in this tank either this week. I have not had a spawn for probably a week. That's, about average. Once a week or so I get a spawn. Maybe every 2 weeks I get a spawn out of my mated pair in this tank. Otherwise, not a lot to talk about. I haven't done any more gravel removal. I haven't done any more maintenance on this tank or anything. So everything is still just ticking over. Actually, I did do some maintenance on this tank. I did a water change a little while ago, and my filter was not running thoroughly enough. There wasn't enough circulation to satisfy me. Something was going wrong with the filter. So I took it apart. I did do a filter change and some maintenance. I got it to the point where it is skimming again. You can see where the surface is clear. It was all kind of scummy and gross and green. My camera will ever focus there. So what I determined was the filter itself, while the pads needed to be changed, like any other filter, whether it's a hang on the back or a canister, the internal workings of the filter, the impeller and the plumbing where the water goes that you don't see, that just gets gummed up after a while, and you've got to get in there. Anybody that's had a hang on the back filter up and running for a year or two knows that they just eventually, not a lot of water's moving through them anymore, and you pull that impeller out and you rinse all that gunk out and you put it all back together and it runs fine. So that's what I think is going on in this tank. I will now have to get in there next time and actually take it apart and do some cleaning on it. I did do a little bit of basic, rinsing with some water, and I got it opened up a little more. As I just showed you, we've got some surface skimming going on again, but I really need to get in there and clean it properly. However, I am still waiting on one other thing before I shoot that video I keep talking about these Sun filters in particular. So hopefully the delivery is scheduled for May the 2nd. So hopefully by the first week in May we'll have some video talking more specifically about my Sun canister filters, the problems I've had, my experiences with them, and so on and so forth. So look forward to that. Make sure you're subscribed and you won't miss it. I also still need to get in here and pull some of those baby Anubias out of the back and rehome them and sort of thin out this mob. It's getting really crazy crowded. That's all one Anubias plant. It's been in there since I set this tank up about 4 years ago, and it's just growing like mad in there. So I really need to get in there and sort of divide the Anubias up a little bit, and that will give me some plants that I can use in some of my other tanks. So my Black Ghost knifefish tank, well, speaking of the devil, we got a dying fish right there. Don't know what's going on with my barbs. This is the second barb this week that I'm losing. This one's still alive. I can see its gills moving, but it is pretty much on the way out the door, it looks like. A few days ago, I had a barb that was in here, and it was swimming funny, and, you could just tell it was on its way out as well, kind of doing what this one's doing now, except it was swimming around near the surface rather than down on the bottom. And I let nature take its course, and after a few days it died, but I didn't know that. I didn't see it. And what I had done was every day when I came around to this tank, I would give it a sniff test. And on one particular day, it smelled a little off, and I had to do a little rooting around, but I did find the dead barb floating in some of the floating vegetation that was in this tank. So I wound up doing a water change just to get some of that funky water out of there. It really smelled like, rotten dead fish. It wasn't overpowering, but if you opened the lid and you stuck your face in there, you smelled it. And so that was time to do a pretty big water change. So I did the big water change, and I wiped the glass down. I removed some of the floating plants, and of course I removed the dead fish. And here it is about 3 or 4 days later, and as I just discovered, and you're discovering this with me, you can see all the drip marks on the glass. I did not prepare for this video at all. I've literally just decided to come do this, and so we're going to see what we see as we go around the room. And in this tank we see another dead barb. I've never really had much luck with barbs. I'm not sure what it is. I really do have odd water. I guess I'll get into talking about my water again one of these days. I know I got a lot of new viewers that might not be familiar with my water system. But it's odd water. It works well for certain purposes, and it just does not work for others. And I'm beginning to think barbs are just one of those fish that won't live in my water. I had a decent amount of success with these, but I've tried the green tiger barbs, and I tried one other kind of tiger barb, and it didn't live either. I can't even remember what it was now. But at any rate, we'll talk about my water here in the future. We'll do some video, and we'll talk about my water system, but I suspect that's what's going on with these barbs. At any rate, I'm down to one barb in this tank now, I believe, and once that barb is gone, we're not going to have barbs in this tank anymore. We're going to move on to something else, so look forward to that too. The tank will remain the same, but the population will change and the community will change, and so this tank has potential to be really exciting. Just don't know what's going to go in it yet. My native tank. This is the one I've been spending my most time on this week. I'm really excited about it. If you have not been following along, you will probably at least notice I've got a lot of fish in here now. I've been going down to my local stream and taking my dip net and catching various crayfish, and I've got a bunch of darters in there now. I've got a Natropus species, I believe. I thought I'd identified it, but now I'm not so sure. There's so many that look so close, and it almost comes down to, having to look at them with a microscope or count the number of, fins, or count the number, or raising their fins, or count the number of scales. So I'm not sure what they are. It's these little ones with the black stripe down the side. Not the one with the red color, but the one that's sort of grayish green with the black stripe down the side. Don't know exactly what that is. The one with the red stripe down the side is a rosy side dace, and they are absolutely gorgeous. And I have some males and females in here, and I'm going to try to bolster that school just because they're really amazing fish. I love them. Didn't know what to do with all these shiners. I've got all these big golden shiners in here, and I need to make room for when I start adding other fish. One of my viewers suggested that if I had a friend, or if I knew somebody that had a pond, I could release them there, because as in most states here in Maryland, you're not allowed to release any fish that have been in your aquarium. It doesn't matter if it's a native fish. It doesn't matter if I caught it myself and then kept it in my aquarium for a few months. I can't put it back where I got it. I would have to put it in someone's private pond, or simply euthanize it if the case may be. But I would not be allowed to put it back in my natural environment here. So these golden shiners are kind of stuck in my tank until I can find something to do with them. But as my viewer pointed out, anyone with a pond will work, and I do happen to know somebody who has a golf course, and as all golf courses, it's got a pond on it. So I don't think she would mind at all if I were to release some of these golden shiners into her golf course pond. And I will speak to her next time I'm down there. She is one of my customers and has a 9-hole golf course here in the area. She's got the putting range and the miniature golf and the driving range and all that stuff. And of course, like I said, they've got a pond. So I hope I can actually utilize that to be able to move some of these fish around. And that will allow us to change up our stock as the summer goes on. So we've also got several more crayfish that I've added in here. Here's one right now. You can see that little guy hiding down in that cave. And there's 4 or 5 more small ones that are in here. I've also got several different species of darter, and I believe I may have a sculpin in there as well. This darter here we've identified as, and by darter I'm talking about that fish right there. We have identified that as a fantail darter. I've got a few of those in here, and then I have a few of one other species darter that I'm not entirely sure what it is. Anyway, you slice it. I'm getting really excited about this tank. I am still waiting to be able to start catching some of the more significant fish that are going to go in this tank. And presumably the first fish we're going to have in here that's going to be any kind of significant fish is going to be a sunfish of some type. Whether it's a bluegill or whatever. There's a whole variety of Lepomis species around here, and they even hybridize once they get into lakes and rivers and stuff. So it's, who knows exactly what's going to go in here, but hopefully I'm going to try to find myself a looker, get something really nice and pretty and gorgeous. If you're not familiar with sunfish, they are beautiful fish, and they're probably about as close as you'll ever see to a coldwater cichlid. They're not cichlids, but the colors and stuff you see on them and the aggressive behavior and everything, very, very similar. So look forward to that. Pretty soon we're going to have at least a couple of sunfish in this tank, and then we'll go from there and see what else we wind up with. So plenty coming up on the native tank. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I feel like I've shot hours worth of video on this in the last 2 days anyway. So there's your final look. Once again, those rosy side dace are just amazing. I just absolutely love them. I've never even seen them before the other day, and now I've got them in my tank, so I'm really happy about that. Anyway, moving on, because I can get stuck on that tank and spend a lot of time there. Well, we can still talk about my native tank while we look at my snail tank, because those darters apparently are the North American coldwater ecological solution to a loach. They are snail eaters, apparently, and they eat little worms and crustaceans, and they serve that little ecological niche. And I don't have any snails or anything in that tank, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to feed them properly. And my only concern is these snails are a highly invasive species. These are ram's horn snails, these larger ones, and they breed like crazy, and the population gets out of control very easily. And I don't know for sure that the loaches, or I'm sorry, the darters would eat them. So I'm afraid to put them in the tank, not knowing whether or not the population is going to be kept under control by the fish. So if you know anything about that, or if you have an opinion on whether or not you think those darters would keep ram's horn snail population under control, let me know. Give me your 2 cents on that. I'd be interested to hear what anyone has to say. And I do have some pond snails in there too, so I've been sort of hand selecting some of the smaller pond snails and throwing them in the tank in hopes that some of them will be able to establish a breeding population in there. Anyway, we're going to move on to my Gudgeon and T-bar tank. This tank is probably going to get a little bit of work done to it today. The vegetation in there is just gone, more or less. There we go. Didn't know whether that was going to focus or not. A lot of the vegetation that is in there is just floating in there. It's just rotten, and it's coming apart. I got a lot of stuff floating up in the surface, up in the corner. I need to pull all that out. And then I don't know exactly what we're going to do. This tank is a good candidate for where some of those baby Anubias could go. I've also thought about putting some Java in here. That's a knifed, durable plant that's not going to get beat on too badly if I tuck it between the rocks. And then other than that, not a lot going on in here. This tank is also a candidate for my rehoming of my mollies that are in my native tank. They're going to be coming out of there soon, and the mollies are 2 fish that I'm going to keep. I've got a Dalmatian molly in there that looks like a black molly, and I've got that silver molly. So I don't know if they'd go in this tank or not. I don't know if they'd look right in here or not, but this is a possibility where they might go, and my black ghost knifefish tank is another possibility where they might go, especially now that those barbs are dying off the way they are. So again, look forward to that. You never know. Oh, things are always changing around here. I've always got something going on. I'm always moving somebody somewhere, doing something. At least that's the way it seems to me. So there's a little look at my rubber lip pleco down on the bottom. That fish has done an amazing job of keeping this tank beautifully clean for me. I always recommend rubber lips. If anybody has any doubt that they are good cleaning fish, don't. They're just fantastic cleaning fish. Every time I've ever had one in my experience, they've always been amazing at keeping a tank clean. I know some people say that they don't, but that's not been my experience. My experience is always that a rubber lip pleco is almost a must-have if you have a tank that you want to keep algae-free, as you can see this tank is. Moving on to my 125, we're probably not going to be able to get a look at this all together. We're going to look at it piece by piece because I got stuff in the room right now. So we're just going to sort of go down the line. Nothing really changed in here this week. I did get in there, if you'll notice, all of this floating vegetation that seems to be all the way across the surface of the tank now. That is because I got in here and I took this main plant and went along and broke all of the little babies. Well, I broke all of the main large babies off of it, I should say, and left them in the tank because I had intended on doing something with them, and I never really got around to it, and they're just still sort of floating in there from several days ago. So this tank's probably going to get some maintenance done to it soon, and I've got all that water sprite to figure out what to do with while I'm in there. Now, what I considered doing with it was getting rid of this main plant that I have in here and replacing it with a new one and letting a new one start over. I really butchered this one back the last time I cut it. I think I did it a little too much, and it's just got all the funky growth on it that's kind of died off, and it's got the green cyanobacteria growing in it right underneath the light. If we look at it from the top side down, it's kind of hard to see under there, but if you look in the back, it gets really thick and green, and it's just got nasty stuff growing on top of it. So it's not hurting anything, but it just almost seems like it's time to sort of refresh that plant and start over with a new one. And You know, I've got fairly sizable ones already floating in there. Why not just tuck a new one underneath that log and start over? This isn't attached to anything. You see this piece of wood here is simply leaning against the top of that rock, and I just sort of lift it up, tuck a piece of root underneath of there, and lay it back down, and that's what holds it in place. It's not actually rooted to or anchored to anything. In fact, sometimes the roots break and it does shift and starts drifting down the tank, and I got to get in there and reposition it. So swapping it out wouldn't be any big deal at all, but I don't know whether I'm going to get around to doing that or not. Like I say, I'm a little infatuated with my native tank at the moment. In fact, today I am going to be going out and looking for stock for it. So even though we're looking at my 125, I am still thinking about my native tank. I can't stress enough how excited I am about that tank right now. So that's all that's going on in this tank. I haven't lost any fish or added any fish or anything. I haven't even done any water changes on this tank in the last week or so. So not really much to talk about with the 125, but there's a little bit wider of a look at it. My puffer tank, my brackish tank here with my figure 8 puffer, is just ticking over. Nothing really going on in here. I haven't even done a water change on it this week. I'll just give everybody a little bit of a look at Butterbean there. Don't know why he's still so skittish around the camera, but he is. And he kind of probably thought I was coming over here to feed him. And now that he sees that I'm not feeding him and I'm just videoing him, he's probably not too happy, so he's going to go sulk in the corner somewhere for a little while. Awesome fish though. Absolutely love Butterbean, as does anybody who's ever spent any time watching my videos of Butterbean, because he's just really cool. And as I suspected, he's going to go down and sulk. But let's see if we can't get a little more closer look at him. Nope, he really does not like this camera. He cracks me up. He's such a drama queen. Anyway, my quarantine tank, I am still having issues with the hatchet fish in there. I've lost 2 or 3 more. I'm down to 1 or 2 hatchet fish again. So I'm going to be making a trip back to the big chain pet store. You know, I've got my receipt and they've died within 2 weeks, so I'll get my money back for them. So I'll try again. I'll add some more. I've never had problems with the hatchet fish before, so I'm not really sure why so many of them died off in the first week I had them in this tank. It could be the fish, it could be the stock, it could be something in my water. You know, again, maybe they just didn't acclimate to my water, and if they do, they'll be fine. Contrary to popular belief, the 20 minutes you spend dripping a fish does not acclimate them. If a fish really needs to adjust its body to a different water parameter, it can take weeks or even months for a body to fully acclimate to a new type of water. And that's possible that the fish were not able to acclimate to my odd water and did not make it. I have soft water, but it's got a lot of dissolved solids in it and a lot of sodium. Because of the system I run it through. Again, I'll do a video about my water here in the near future, and I'll explain a little more into that. But it's weird water, and soft water fish like hatchet fish can live in it, but they can also have difficulty living in it. And again, we'll talk about that a little more. But I think that's what's going on with the hatchet fish. So we'll see what goes on there. And I do have plans for the hatchet fish. I do have a tank that I want them to go in, so that will be up in the near future too. My red-clawed crab tank is, well, I don't want to say it's a disaster, because I kind of expected it to be like this, but it's kind of disastrous. They are so destructive in here. You can see how everything's all muddy. They've actually torn all of the stuff apart, and they've rooted through the mud, and they dig in the mud looking for any kind of, you know, worms, crustaceans, anything. It's just food. They also eat the moss itself, so the moss is all chewed up and torn up. I'm constantly having to pick it up off of the bottom. You know, they knock it into the water and then the moss sinks. The filter gets clogged really quickly. You can see there's very little water movement, so it's going to be time to change the filter again here in the fairly near future. Probably ought to be about due for a water change in this tank too. But don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining at all. This tank is fantastic. I love watching these little crabs run around and do their thing. But you can see how muddy the bottom is. I mean, it almost looks like I have a partially dirted tank, even though it's not meant to be. And it's just because these crabs root and dig and eat the plants and everything else. So, a lot of fun, really neat tank. It is about time for me, I suppose, to get out in the yard and find some more plants. And I guess replace the crab garden so they can get in there and have their buffet salad bar. And we'll just sort of put this tank back together, let them keep going, and it'll be a fun tank all the way around, as I keep saying. So there you go, all the way around the world. I know I said I didn't have a lot to talk about, but I still managed to get it to 26 minutes. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe if you're not already. You don't want to miss anything good that I got coming up. And obviously, I've got plenty coming up. So thanks again for watching this one. I'll see you real soon in the next one.